think we can get started. So today we'll be talking about synergizing human behavior with AI, a strategic approach to predictive marketing or predictive market research. And yeah, Jay, Bill, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Victoria. Hello, everyone. Bill, thank you for joining today. We'll go through maybe quick introductions and a little bit about ourselves and each of the companies that we're representing, and then looking forward to getting into talking about AI. Obviously, it's kind of top of mind for a lot of folks, and there's a lot of, I think, uncertainty and maybe even anxiety in some ways about kind of how to harness the power. Bill and I have done a lot of talking and brainstorming about this, so excited to get in. So anyway, as Victoria said, I'm Jay Hauser. I run our research and insights team here at Fuel Cycle. Quick background on Fuel Cycle. Really, Fuel Cycle is the best way to think about it is a piece of integrated technology that we built to consolidate information, audiences as a one-stop shop for insights, getting insights quicker, more actionable, and faster to the end users. We do that by ingesting all different sorts of data, qualitative, quantitative, CRM lists, different partners. We have a huge partner network, all in one place to prevent silos. It's really a theme we'll probably be talking about, really analogous in the idea of AI, as we're able to consolidate information and make more accurate, more correct decisions, do that faster, and then ultimately just increase the success of our clients as they're able to harness the power of data and really get a full view of their audiences and their goals. Bill, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. This is super exciting. First, I want to thank Fuel Cycle, who I've partnered with for, I think, going on 5 years. And so obviously it's an excellent partnership. I'm excited to be here with Jay and folks from Fuel Cycle to talk about what's on everyone's mind these days. Just to back up a little bit, I started out as a game designer. I've been creating software-related products for 25 years, starting with game design, which is all about human to computer interaction, which is going to be core to what we talk about today. I moved on from game design to software as a service, where I was working for a big technology company. And I was leading both the design and development of the technology, and also helping quite a bit with the executive team in terms of marketing. I was always using market research to test games, to test other products, to test my software ideas. And what I found about 6 years ago, really 7 now, is that things were moving so fast that the traditional research that I needed for my digital work, for my fast turnaround work, wasn't fast enough. So, as a technologist and product creator in the digital field, the software field, I decided to create my own product. And in thinking about that, I wanted it to be fast, so you could turn around, you could get data and you can get insights in days, not weeks. I wanted it to be behavioral, and I wanted it to be of value. It's a tall order. And what we've done is created a predictive market where you use virtual currency to weigh in on the ideas you predict will be most successful in the marketplace, which is a little different than your personal ideas. So you're using the currency to bet, in a sense, on the ideas that will be most successful in the marketplace, whether it's product ideas, where it's product names, marketing messages, packaging, etc. So I took everything I knew about what I wanted for myself, and I applied it to Fast Focus. So now we can both use virtual currency to predict what will be most successful, and we collect verbatim feedbacks on why did you invest that currency. And we are starting to use AI to pull the sentiment out of that verbatim feedback. Our collection of our investments or our bets, we have been using AI, which is getting richer and richer, and creating 3 scores: a predictive score, which is the passion score, an idea score, which is general affinity, and controversiality. So that's a little bit about Fast Focus, and let's dig in, Jay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Bill. I think as we start thinking about the structure of this conversation and what AI is, I think it's probably good to create analogies in what fuel cycle is trying to do, what Fast Focus is trying to do, and how AI helps us in that in the market research industry. In that way, AI is very much just another tool for us to master, and I think very important for us to discuss what is known, what is unknown, what's possible. I think what's true is that AI is not going to advance past our ability to understand it or harness it. I think where the exciting part of this topic is what is not yet thought of. So many of the ideas and so much of the conversation in this space is net new because we're trying to see what's around the corner and think about how we approach our work in new ways. Very similar to what you talked about in your own work, very similar to how we're approaching it as well. I think it's one of the main reasons that we're so all in on AI because we understand what is possible. We can go faster, we can consolidate information, we can get a more complete and accurate picture, we can extract deeper insights, and we can do all of those things better with AI. So maybe, Bill, we can start with an introduction of AI. I know you've done a lot of kind of background research. Maybe you can kind of start us off there. We can talk about also then, I think in the conversation of AI, it's important to talk about, maybe not too philosophically, but what is human? What is uniquely human, those traits about us as humans, and kind of make that separation. And then that gray space in between, or that intersection about what we maybe have preconceived ideas of what is human or not, or intelligence, really becomes important to understand how we're going to be able to harness this tool. So Bill, do you want to start us off with some thoughts about just kind of the background and some of the research you've done and how we've gotten here today from AI?
Yeah, digging in as a person creating a product and trying to make it smarter using AI, I've gone in deep in a number of areas. So, first, how can AI enhance human intelligence in market research? And so with Fast Focus, we're looking at certain scores where we're taking our data and we're starting to use machine learning, and we're saying, what does this data tell us? The first is, people are investing virtual currency. So based on how much currency they spend, we started developing algorithms that said, how many tokens does a person need to spend to be passionate, which means buy into it? So we have to set different benchmarks using our algorithms / AI to determine a behavioral situation where someone's investing tokens, and at what point do we say they're passionate? It's been very interesting. Full disclosure, people are starting to ask us for very defined benchmarks across different sectors. We are not there yet, but we are using all of our data to determine what is passionate, what means you like it, what means you hate it or won't buy it. On the other side, we're looking at taking data that we got in the verbatims and doing sentiment analysis. We use partners for that. So these are two very clear areas where we're starting to use AI. Where we're going with it are things like chatbots, right? So as we're seeing, these bots are getting smarter and smarter. And one of the things I thought about as I prepared for this was, well, what's the relationship between a chatbot, which is an AI that can talk and look like someone, and a human? Like, why are we just going to use it for directions in our car, or are we going to use it to decide on products or what doctor to use? And interestingly, this is where I think humans and AI really can come together, is that the studies say that people believe chatbots. People build bonds with chatbots, and people drop their idea of, I'm talking to a bot, very quickly. Now, the better and more human they get. So now you have AI that can talk to you and you believe it. And we could go into a lot of areas with this. For instance, psychologists, psychiatry is starting to use chatbots and AI to interact with patients. And the research is showing it's very effective. Some of it says, boy, that bot is a lot nicer than my therapist and will listen to everything I say and not ask me crazy questions. So the line is moving, but my general findings are we won't be replaced too soon, but we may one day merge with them. But there's place for humans and there's place for AI for sure. So
Yeah, a lot of, I mean, I agree. I don't think we'll be replaced. If we are, then to our future overlords, like, this is
yeah,
the message. I think what a lot of what you're saying is the deconstruction of what we already know, which is why AI is so important in the market research industry, right? There is generally agreed on practices and kind of right and wrong or better or worse in the conclusions that we're drawing. So as we take data and we can model that, which we've done at a smaller scale, and then we just add computing power to that. That's most of what AI is kind of in its existence today. We're kind of adding gasoline to something that we already know, that we can already think through, and we're just making it bigger and faster. So we're adding more data, and it's becoming intelligent in that way. You started to talk about this area in kind of psychology or even in chatbots, that even a lot of our interaction is probably relatively codable or relatively understandable. So if you think about taking survey data and we have X amount of completes and we have some level of confidence in that we're making decisions, and we add more angles to that data and more answers to that, we increase our confidence, and AI is able to extract those much faster than human can, right? So in that way, it's kind of an acceleration of what is already known. Then we get into this gray area. Bill, you touched on this, I think, really well in this. How do you interact with the chatbot that makes it seem real? It's probably because most of our interaction is relatively predictable. I can probably understand what the right answer is when you're looking for help with your cell phone bill or whatever it might be. But then there's this area that I think we're still trying to figure out and decode. And that's the area, I think, for market research in particularly, that's so exciting. So a lot of quantitative research is kind of binary in a lot of ways. Qualitative research generally is kind of viewed as a nice to have, a luxury, a wonderful amount of color and depth that we don't always have the time or the money to invest in, because it's very laborious. It takes you and I right here talking back and forth to understand how Bill thinks. And I have to do that at scale, and there's only so many hours in a day. That to me is probably one of the most exciting areas of AI and market research. And I think net new, because we're going to be able to conduct qualitative work even when you get into sentiment. You talked about sentiment score in your own work, right? Or passion.
right.
We're not going to be able to get all of the edges of passion and sentiment, because the human emotion and complexity is very complicated. And maybe we will. Maybe we'll understand. I think it creates or necessitates more and more of an understanding of what it is to be human. But if we can think about qualitative research as our next step of understanding, how do we use a chatbot, for example, to probably take a conversation further than we could in discussion prompts or in survey questions, kind of this asynchronous approach, and create more of a live feel for real humans to respond to, decode that information. And if you can imagine asynchronously working with a chatbot and uploading thousands of videos as opposed to just 12 IDIs, deconstructing those transcripts, understanding what we can put into trained models, which I think, and I don't want to get too off the rails here, but Bill, it also makes me think about training a model, right? We've talked a lot about not just, I heard a commercial on the way in here on the radio, and it was powered by AI. I don't even know what that means, right? Like it has to be a pretty trained model. It has to be pretty purposeful in understanding what we're trying to get to. It's still very much at our prompting, which prompt engineering is a whole huge, within Fuel Cycle, we've got thankfully a lot of very smart engineers and strategic people thinking about what goes into help understand the output, that kind of getting into that what is human area.
Right. Yeah. I love all that. And I dug in, we're very interested in social listening. We don't do it, we partner for it. You know, it's really, I think, one of the great areas for looking at big data and seeing what people are talking about, right? And I said, you know, I basically wanted to investigate, okay, what does it take to do everything you're talking about, which is going to become more and more concise and valuable. And I have a short list and I'm going to read some of the things on it. So 8 reasons that, you know, big data fails. And I'm saying it sometimes it succeeds greatly. Sometimes it's, you know, okay. There's all different levels of it. Not having the right data. So you have to really think about, what data am I going after? You know, what is the noise in it? What's the not the noise in it? Not having the right people and talents. I'm just saying, we need to get there and we will get there, but these are all the considerations to take a large piece of data, synthesize it down to the answers we want as researchers. Not having the right technology, the methodologies, um, ethics came up. So there's all sorts of things. There were some really examples I can't even say on public TV here. Um, but you know, they talked about, in big data is there might be racial bias, there might be gender bias, there might be criminal activity mentioned. And some of the examples I saw, as I saw some big data results, were recommendations for brands that were like would be outlawed. Um, that said, we have to develop methodologies that really work. We have to figure out who are the right people and how to train them. What are our standards for getting to answers? Um, and I still believe, at the end of the day, when we get the results from big data, when we've done it really well, it won't replace asking humans. I think it's, you know, what we've talked about, and I think is up for discussion and it'll change, is, so you get answers from big data and those answers tell you this, and this. Okay. Very great directionally. You can take that and compose your survey questions. You can create a fast focus with the right intent. You can guide your IDIs. It'll probably get you a long way to where you want to go to sit down with humans. You know, I just don't think you can replace a million years of evolution and the uncertainty of the way we think and the illogical ways we think. So when I think, you know, when I think of AI and humans, you know, my model is Spock and Captain Kirk. And you think about how they interacted. You know, Spock was before his time, that character, because he basically said, Captain, I have no idea why you're going to attack the Klingons and why you're not going to put the cloak of invisibility on. And I'm sorry for those out there who haven't seen Star Trek, but Spock was basically AI in a sense. He was a biological person who was completely logical. And Captain Kirk, to me, represents how we're all illogical. He did things that everyone went, that is nuts, and they always proved them right because they wanted to prove human instincts are better. And I think that applies. And I think at the end of the big data thing, even when we do it really well, you know, I think we need to test humans.
I think it's a great, again, kind of finding that. I find myself thinking often, where is that kind of crossover section of AI and intelligence that maybe looks human and actual human behavior in those end cases? We've even talked about synthetic respondents, right? And so when we get into this idea of market research and being predictive in a lot of ways is not magic. It's better understanding how and why we're making decisions in certain areas, and to the extent, again, that we can kind of create boundaries and rules and different prompts, we're going to see better into the future. So we've talked about trends. We talked about the Stanley Cup trend as an example.
Yeah.
And how do you predict that trend, right? So that comes up out of nowhere. My wife has a huge, I mean, it's huge. I don't know how big it is. I'm sure you've seen memes about that.
Yeah.
But why was that not another brand? Why did Yeti not have a right for that space, or Hydro Flask, or whoever it might be? Probably because that trend happened organically somewhere in the outer understandings of what it is to be human, and the kind of the drama and theater of humanity.
Yeah.
However, on the other side, to the extent that we can understand what goes into that, we might be able to better model and consult with someone like Hydro Flask or a Yeti or something and say, here's kind of what it took to kind of create this trend. So brands then in that way might be more intelligent and better informed in trying to create trends. Often people have been trying to create trends forever. It's a huge advantage in marketing. We'll get closer. We might not be able to do that in the unpredictability, and we might not even want to do that, right? The Super Bowl is coming up. We had talked about the Seahawks Super Bowl, whatever that was, 2015 or something, threw past the 1 yard line, and you're like, oh my gosh, what do you have Marshawn Lynch? Why are you doing that? And history is written. Those sorts of things are not really good or bad. That's probably not really the space for analytics. And so in that way, like AI is not going to encroach on this world of what we think is human. I think we can deconstruct what we are and what we think of as being human. Okay, I've done all this great thinking and these analytics, and I'm going to make this decision. We're doing that now. Right. We're just going to do it better, I think, and more at scale, the better we understand the thinking that goes into that process.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, when I think of these surprises that happen, and they've happened, you know, when I was a kid, not to age myself, the hula hoop and the yo-yo were out of this world. Like everyone was using a hula hoop, you know, no matter boys, girls, every parents, etc. It was a piece of plastic, you know, with a loop, and you put it around your waist. It took off. But, you know, if we flip it on the side, there's something else that's happening. So there's social listening, right? And there's getting big data. But more and more, the people who are running TikTok and Facebook and everyone else, they're using AI to figure out who we are and what we like and what we do. And so they're feeding us content, better and better content. Sometimes they're a little bit off. You know, if you look for like something weird, you're going to get it in your stream for 2 weeks. But there's also an ecosystem where AI is taking charge, is playing a big role in our cognitive evolution in a sense. It's not a reactive mode. It's people are trying to, I'll use the word, manipulate us. And they are very successful with their algorithms. I'm on Amazon all the time, and I love what they show me, you know, and I go here and I go there. So in a way, there's this interface between AI and humans that's bi-directional. So as we think about like looking at big data and looking at social listening and changing what we put on social listening, well, social media is then going back and sort of rewiring our brains in a bit to favor certain things and love things more and amplify what we love and hate. And that system is just going to grow and grow. And we have to figure out like how that all works to our benefit.
It's a great point of the considerations that we, I think, need to make in the market research industry about where are the appropriate boundaries, where are those ethical considerations, where are the creativity, where is the empathy, et cetera, that adds nuance to insights. I think another thing that we had talked about was the Calvin Klein ad recently with Jeremy Allen White, and what an uproar that caused as a marketing campaign. And I think about what happened there, and we all experienced that as pretty organic, right? And there's probably a lot that happened and resulted from something like that wasn't anticipated. I think we'll be able to understand that better. And as we define those things, we say we really want to make a splash with this group, this profile. And we might even want to try to get this sort of reaction from another group and another profile. That's the sort of thinking I think that's really important in the market research industry, is to not already is, also not maybe worrying or being slowed down by the areas that we probably won't be able to touch, or maybe as we define not wanting to touch, but really understanding that social listening aspect, right? And kind of in some ways it becomes a more curated experience for a consumer to really understand and ingest all of the nuance and language and tonality and facial expression and experience and identity, put those into a system, collect that more, and ask really intelligent questions of it. We're going to get better insights and better products and better services, probably more tailored to an individual experience. I don't know that we're going to get to the place where it's going to get outside of our control. I think that that's simply a process of, again, kind of decoding and deconstructing what already is. I think a lot of when you interact with a chatbot, going back to kind of one of your first points, it feels like it's human, but it's not. It's just really good at mirroring what we probably would expect, what the average answer might be, right? And the more we can funnel into that, I think we're going to harness it even more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I looked into. I have a favorite book of the last 10 years called *Sapiens*, and it was a book about humans, and humans are the only animals on Earth that make up stories and believe stories. And when I think of the chatbot, that applies there, right? So something that can tell me a story, we're pretty gullible if it's convincing. So I think that plays a big role in how we have to think of things. And in terms of big data and social listening, I think at some point, and that point will probably be soon, we can train AI to do things that we are doing now, all the things I talked about that might be hard with social listening. We can certainly train it to look at the data with more human eyes and characteristics, kind of like you make a chatbot smart, you make the AI smart. It can look at and pull out all the ethnic problems that we talked about, or stuff you don't want in there. It can take out the noise. And the important part here is, I think the AI can keep training itself pretty soon, how to get better and better. And when AI learns to train itself, the cycles are like minutes and hours. And once we get there, social listening, the inferences AI can make and the conclusions it can make are going to beyond our capabilities. It's not going to be, oh, I need a good prompt writer, or I need someone a data scientist to analyze all this data. I'm going to be using my AI, trained AI that I have developed to make itself smarter and then look at all this data. I don't know, but I'm saying we could be 2 or 3 years away from that. That said, I'll still go back to, if that was all true and the AI said, I'm rating these messages or taglines, and I've listed them from 1 to 10 with my confidence, I'm still going to grab those top 3 or 4 and put them in front of a set of humans, and that'll be my final step. I just can't see getting away from that.
Something I think that kind of getting us close to that, and this idea of kind of a synthetic respondent, and all that is really the idea, to the extent that we can predict previous behavior and use that to get better. We've also talked about that then opens up the aperture that truly no idea is dumb, right? And we can take 100 ideas, we can filter them down, probably not to the point of finality, right? To your point, that we're still going to want that layer of nuance and empathy and the ethical considerations for our particular kind of view in the moment. But we can get much more common. We can take those 100 ideas, narrow them down maybe to 10, and then really dive deep. So in that way, it speeds up and replaces some things that are laborious and costly for us now also then puts a higher value on what is uniquely human. I think in that way, it's really important to be thinking about those trained models. I think often when I've seen AI applied, just kind of slapped on as like a badge or a sticker to a problem, it's often not great, right? It's kind of random, and it kind of exposes maybe the cracks. And I think it highlights the importance for understanding. And I know that where Fast Focus and Fuel Cycle are both developing quite a bit, thinking quite a bit, and how do you harness that one for a market research perspective, but then also maybe industry, maybe even also client, and the more data you can ingest into the system, and to your point, the smarter that system becomes, more quickly will we be off to the races. I think that it's, for this, my takeaway from our preparation for this conversation, and I'm sure will now be ongoing because we've done quite a bit of talking about this already, is really understanding more and more of what those questions are and what the parameters are, thinking about as researchers what we're trying to accomplish, and then asking those questions, like, for example, coming up with a survey through AI is now possible because I can understand all the best practices that go into that. So there's a little bit of upfront effort for me and understanding to put that in, and then I can do that on repeat, and it gets smarter and smarter and more trained with our guidance to become really a more effective tool. Bill, I know we're getting close to time for Q&A, so I would love to hand it over to you for any kind of last thoughts, and then if there's any questions from the folks who are joining us, would love to get into that as well. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, this conversation is going to be ongoing for years. So first I want to thank you for having it. It's wonderful. I think, like you said, surveys will play a very big role, in the future, and they will be built by AI, and all the things that we do now that are a little bit clumsy and manual about surveys, they'll just get better and better. One last thing, because I think it's a good note to end on, is we work with a partner who does synthetic respondents. So I have a lot of these conversations with their team about, their ideas. I'm going to build a respondent that mimics a Gen AI female who likes the Gap or a brand. And that's tough. It's tough. So in the end, we are going to have synthetic respondents, which is just the result of big data training capabilities to emulate a certain type of respondent. So that's where I'll finish, because that's the future, and love to hear questions.
Great.
Well, thank you guys so much. That was a great conversation, and yeah, looking forward to listening to you guys chat even more about it in the future. So we have a few questions that came in. So our first one is from Michelle, and kind of a more general question about whether or not you should be polite to AI. So, some people, when they're talking to AI, say, please and thank you. Other people say you need to be more commanding. What do you guys think about that angle?
I think that to the extent that it mirrors the interaction that we want it to be is important to think about, right? So yes, please and thank you, but I think that that's more an example of what we put into it and what we want to receive at the output, right? It's very much still in our control. I think from like a getting information, you want to be very clear. It's a machine. It's not a human. Its feelings aren't going to be hurt. It won't change its answer. So I think that that's probably more of a question for us and how we want to experience it, as opposed to asking something very clearly, whether you say please or thank you or not. The model is going to spit out the correct answer as best it can based on our prompt and how we've trained it. So I think it's kind of also something for us to decide how we want to interact with it. Chatbots, as Bill had mentioned.
Yeah, and I'll just add, there are times I'm not polite. It's mostly for my own entertainment, but you get some answers from, ChatGPT that just aren't going anywhere. Sometimes they're really good, and sometimes they're like, so I say a few things, but I don't think I've hurt any ChatGPT feelings.
There's another question about what jobs from Barry do are at risk of being displaced over the next 3 years. There's a ton on that, right? Like industries that are in jeopardy. Market research is an industry that is often cited as that AI, I think there's a fear that it could be displaced. However, in our teams, I think it's more augmented, right? So I talk with our teams less about your jobs in jeopardy and more, again, getting to this, what is valuable about you as an analyst? If it's something that a calculator can do, I mean, I'm sure when the calculator came out, people were freaking out at multiplication. I don't know, but just imagine that. So you no longer need to do 6 times 6 manually. There's a calculator for that. And so you change then what you're able to do. So I view it less as being displaced and more about if you want to stay in that job, that could then be kind of taken over by AI. So if you're going through and analyzing crosstabs as an example, and we can get technology to do that for us, then that moves us closer to what is unique, that layer of empathy and consideration and creativity and strategy that we might not fully get from our AI models at this point. Bill, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think my recommendation is you have to do both. And if you're in, let's just stick with market research. If you're in market research, you really have to learn this stuff. You have to understand where AI is going in your industry, just like you have to understand anything about the expertise in your industry. I think there's two parts of it. One is there'll be more call for people who can really have human to human contact. So when you're doing interviews, be a black belt interviewer, because that's going to be important. But don't just be a human interface. Understand the whole picture, which is going to include AI and big data and chatbots and data cleaning and all the things we talked about. So, specialize perhaps in your human stuff or specialize perhaps in the AI stuff. You got to know both. That's my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another question: how can organizations maintain a balance between human intuition and AI-driven insights? I think that's really about harnessing this power. I think why it's so important, just from my own personal perspective at Fuel Cycle, why it's so important to kind of keep pace with this and not just allow it to happen outside of the walls that we work within. We're putting a ton of time and energy and thinking into harnessing that, right? So that, I think, is how you maintain that balance, is by wrapping your head around it and being in control of what's happening so you can make those decisions. I think that there's also, as we kind of go down this road together, and there's going to be a lot of net new and thinking that we didn't know was possible, and we'll learn to kind of apply AI to apply to these questions that we have. It's going to be really important to then constantly be asking ourselves and kind of looking in the mirror in a lot of ways of, now what does this mean? Now, so what? So we can define that and maintain that balance, right? It's not going to just be one or the other. It's going to be a journey that we'll be in control of and can define.
Yeah. And in terms of, running a business, whether it's Fuel Cycle or Fast Focus or whatever company you work for, the money's going to shift. And what I mean by that is, the amount of investment in people doing the people stuff in market research, the interviews, the surveys, the focus groups, the analyzing all that, the money's going to shift more towards AI, which will do things really productively. Now, people still have to, control that, manage that, build that. But look at what you do right now. And if you're still planning to be in this business in 5 years, think about what it looks like next year and the year after, and where you have to educate yourself and get experience so that how we do market research a year from now, you're still have full value, to your company, to your organization, to yourself.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Another question: how can companies ensure transparency and accountability in the use of AI tools for market research, particularly when dealing with sensitive consumer data? That's a great question, and one that's obviously very important in our industry, and particularly important as data just continues to explode. Again, I'd kind of put that, I think, in the category of our ability to harness it. Nothing changes from our perspective in the sense of we are very committed to security, to privacy, and so we have to create those walls, maybe new walls, maybe new aspects of those walls, but we don't want any of our client data or consumer data getting out. So again, when you train a model and you put up a wall around a particular company, let's say, and not having it go open into kind of more open LLMs where it's training those models and information is leaking out, one walling off that, but then also considerations, kind of, walls within walls, sort of the thing, for clients and for consumers. And so all of those same principles guide anything we do, right? Anything that we talk about with privacy and security, that doesn't change. We might have to shift in new ways, but it's still the same guiding principle. So far we've been doing that, right? We've closed off models for fuel cycle, and then are also training those for clients so that we're not going outside of fuel cycle, and client information or consumer information is not being spread outside of the safe zones that we've created for that data.
Yeah, I'll just tack on a little bit to that, which is, we are starting to use AI to analyze verbatims and text sentiment. And the question we had from as we were starting to develop this, and I was talking to people, was exactly that. Oh, your clients aren't going to want your data to go into ChatGPT. Obviously not, into the public version. So not to promote any one company, but I'll say companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google all have trained up models that may not be trained exactly how we want them or you want them, but they have flavors of AI models that you could use that are like ChatGPT, and they're inside the Amazon or Microsoft or Google firewall. So it's there. That's a little more expensive, but that's how we're solving it.
Yeah. I think we can probably wrap it up at this point. There's one last comment from Michelle, actually, and this is, I'm just going to mention it because it's particularly where I'm excited as a qualitative researcher. Taking quantitative principles to qualitative research is, to me personally, one of the most exciting areas. Michelle, you had mentioned as a UX researcher, it's so exciting to think about what's possible. And I think the information we're going to be able to, the confidence we're going to be able to have, so much of qualitative research in reality is directional. So many insights are directional, and to be able to build that confidence and make more confident decisions from truly the kind of enabling the voice of the consumer is, I think, a super exciting space for us as researchers and harnessing the power of AI.
The last thing I'll say is amen to that. And we as market researchers our ability to predict success or failure of ideas that we're testing, I think is going to change exponentially in the next years for the better. And there'll be no denying it. And we are going to have a bigger place at the table. That's what I predict.
Well said.
Love it. Well, thank you guys so much, Bill, Jay, for speaking and sharing your knowledge on all things AI and market research today. And thank you to everyone who joined. Again, the recording will be sent out within the next 48 hours. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. Thanks.